In this case study, I talk about how this Moon and Taurus Talisman, the Silver Cradle, reversed my heart disease and helped save my life. Okay, now, did it like directly do this? Kind of like impossible to tell. But this is what I made it for, and these are the effects. And if I really did have to rank in terms of the talismans that I made and the results that happened after that are truly the most meaningful and the most important, this has to be number one. I think it definitely has to be number one. And, I think there's some other caveats to all the things that were going on that led to me being in this position. And we'll talk about this beforehand. Because this talisman I've received several criticisms of, or several criticisms of the situations going up, being like, oh, the other talismans you made were creating bad circumstances, or like, oh, it's because the elections of your Mars talisman or one of these other talismans was incorrect, and this is what's causing you problems, causing you disease, causing you this. And no, I think these are all very fair points to consider. I also think, naturally, the situation that I was in at this time, this talisman was made 2021. So if you followed the rest of the case studies, I'm going in chronological order, we're near the end of the set of talismans I've made. So at this point, I am Chief Operation Officer in like the middle part of the pandemic of 2021, and we have grown. Our company has at this point at least 3x'd in size. So we have about 25, 30 individuals that I have hired and multiple enterprise contracts and projects that we are running. And so both of the contracts with our enterprise clients have been fulfilled and executed. Both the Hyatt Hotels contract that I discussed in the Mercury Talisman and this and the other one that I had discussed in the Venus and Sun Talisman, Sun and Venus case study video. So generally in a very stressful situation. And in general, look at like the health of like your average executive. Not good. As then consider in the middle of pandemic times, being forced to stay in your house, all the levels of stress. And particularly if one does look at my chart and do some medical astrological calculations, which I'll get to, full signatures for heart disease. Also, I have some great like family history of heart disease. So really we're just like lining up all of the considerations. But it stands to reason. I was quite young when I got this diagnosis. And so that is odd and out of the ordinary. Ultimately, I wasn't surprised to hear that I had these early symptoms of heart disease, because not just of really evaluating my lifestyle and seeing how my health was changing, but during 2020, there was a situation where I had a really heart-rending call from one of my gurus, one of my most beloved teachers. And they were having an aortic dissection, which is where the top of your heart, the aorta, is about to rip off. I think his blood pressure was over 200. Top blood pressure number was over 200. This is like a prime going to die kind of number. And then it turns out that there is like an aneurysm in his heart that was like over a foot long. And so he called me and he was just absolutely in tears. And at this point, we hadn't seen each other for a while in the pandemic. And, my guru is very sensitive and one of the most loving people that I've ever met in my entire life. My teacher of Indian classical music. And, he told me how much that he loved me and that how much he didn't want to die, and that there is still so much he wanted to teach me, and that he wanted us to sing together. And, this honest aspiration to live beyond the mortality that was there. It's like, what is magic for, but not for this? And so, I sat down in meditation and I went and performed one of my Buddhist sadhana practices at like the highest level of severity that I had capacity to do. And I made a deal with one of those deities. And part of the deal was like, save him, and whatever sort of karma that he has that's causing this issue, I'll just take it on. I'll just deal with it. And I know 1,000,000,000%, like one doesn't just do that. You shouldn't ever just like do that. But I have this connection with my teacher. It was like, who else do you do it for in this way? That's so severe. And as someone who performs magic of time like this, you can become, the more you do this, ideally you become sensitive to the vibrations. You become sensitive to the different qualities of time. And you can kind of sniff out the moments where decisive action needs to be taken. And then you get to choose whether you're on the heroic path or not, or if it's, worth your time and effort, and you go ahead and make the choice. And so there is no doubt in my mind this was one of those choices. So later down the line, when I really became aware of some bad habits that I had, and talked to my medical professional, who I was just hanging out with the other day, and we got to laugh about this whole situation. It was like, oh yes, time to not die in 10 years, because that was my diagnosis. It was like, so if you stay the same, expect a major cardiac event in 10 years, which is basically like a full-blown heart attack, which you could potentially die from. And I know from both sides of my family, this is something I need to care about and I need to worry about. And for fun, we'll go into some of the medical delineations or ideas about the particular signification I have in my chart as well. We can also talk about how to fix this without using a talisman, because this is important to talk about, and how to understand and derive the nature of the issue, which I didn't necessarily know how to do at the time, but I think I was able to see it. It all made sense. So what kind of materials did I want to use for this talisman? So I chose to go, oh wow, slight mistake over here. Ignore the sapphire. But I wanted to use crystal and lapis lazuli. I mean, of course, like pure crystal, shines clear like the light of the moon. This is very much a lunar stone. And then lapis lazuli, Zemek is the stone, also called lapis. It is there a pale blue color with small golden specks. The pigment azure is made from it and is a sure remedy for black bile and quantum fever, and for fainting caused by the vapors of black bile. So I wanted to make a moon talisman, a lunar talisman, that drew on some of these very health-giving effects, these life-giving effects of the moon. And this was also the last talisman that I had yet to make from all the planetary rings. So this was like the completion of my final set. And so lapis lazuli, very strong connection to lunar deities, Divine Mother, Ishtar, and also comes to mind. And then clear crystal being like this pure essence of the moon, the lunar rays, the silver rays that bestow down like the benefic gaze of the mother. So these were ideas and qualities that were buzzing through my mind. I wanted to figure out what to use for the creation of this lunar talisman. And then both in 3 books of occult philosophy and Lily refer to these 2 stones. Lily, we have the selenite and all soft stones, crystals, is related to the moon. Then among metals, silver, among stones, crystal, the silver marcasite, and all stones that are white are referred to as the moon. Lapis is a notoriously soft stone, especially when you compare it to the corundum of a sapphire. And for the incenses, I used a mix of white poppy, frankincense, and camphor, which are all mentioned as incenses in Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy. For the moon, we make a suffumigation of the head of a dried frog, the eyes of a bull, the seed of a white poppy, frankincense, and camphor. So all of these were mixed and crushed together and used as the suffumigatory incense over the sigil of the moon. And then the planetary intelligence sigil of the moon is it's quite extra. There's a lot going on here. It's uncharacteristically complex in this way. And particularly, what was the request I made to the spirit? Was to bestow rejuvenation, health, restoration of vitality, and resilience. I know some other individuals, definitely Cliff Lowe, I've seen quite a lot. He will make lunar talismans out of aquamarine for rejuvenation, and seems to have worked quite well for him. I did not choose to use aquamarine, though. I think that would have been potentially even like a better choice. But we work with the materials that we have. And we do our best with what we have listed by the traditional sources. And indeed, the invocation I used for this was the Orphic Hymn to the Moon, which is as follows. I also always find it funny that the engraving of Luna, of these Lacinio engravings, who pulls the chariot of the moon? It's these maidens, it's these mothers, it's like the women. I think this is the only like human-drawn chariot out of all of them. And ultimately, this is what some of the talisman stones ended up looking like. So we can have, a meager artistic representation of the planetary sigil of the moon with my diamond tip stylus, both on the lapis as well as the clear crystal stone. Hey, and then the subject. It's me once again. So interesting facts about my chart and how it could potentially influence or apply here is the moon rules benefic houses in my sidereal chart, as well as rules dark houses in my tropical chart. So one could think, if it is pulled solely working on the results of the houses of the chart, there could be some mixed results here if it's just working in a tropical way. Though opposite really is true from the sidereal chart. It rules one of the most benefic houses possible. So one would think, yeah, this would be quite great. Also in my chart, I have Moon and Saturn conjunct together in the place which signifies like heart disease, the place of the body in the chest where problems could arise, which is classically noted as heart disease. But what is the issue? What's the real cause of heart disease if you have Saturn and Moon together? It has to do with the Moon being mind, being afflicted, stress, anxiety, and how we cope with those problems is the cause of the heart disease. Which, stress is a killer. Just last year, I ended up talking to a colleague who sat in the same space, and that year they had a major heart issue that I can't remember if it required surgery, but it did require multiple hospital visits, and it was so stressful. And we joked like, "This industry's killing us," and it totally is. It totally is. They're also very much at a high executive position, and big startup scene, raising tons of money. That kind of stuff, which is a whole other octane layer. Thankfully, we never had to, placate an investor in my old past life of the world. But so this Josh was quite in a different situation. So this was, firmly a full entrepreneur Josh, enterprise software consultant, COO, company that was freshly saved from the jaws of the pandemic, and my job was to fully grow the company. So we had already tripled in size, both in terms of more than tripled in revenue, but tripled in size of personnel. So being able to create a company culture and ensure that everybody is like kicking ass and having a great time and being successful in their career and learning valuable skills, as well as getting client work done. And then there's all the client work and navigating the needs, desires, and political structure of a sometimes multi-billion-dollar balance sheet company, which is very stressful. I will tell you from firsthand experience. And that's before you get to all the different personalities that exist inside a company, which is pretty stressful. So this idea of, well, how is Josh? How is his mental state? Truly not good. Not bad in a depressive sort of way, but certainly in a stress anxiety way. Peak stress and anxiety. I remember I'm truly grateful things didn't turn out worse than they were. It was like every day I had to wake up and boil the ocean around me. That was the vibe and the nature of responsibility of what was going on all the time. So in a similar way, we had talked about before that Shani or Saturn is cooling. The Moon is also cooling. So I certainly was also thinking I could really use some more cooling support to all this heat and all this energy that is having to just course through my system every single day. So let us review our election. So we have the Moon on MC, which is favored by Picatrix. Lots of debates around Moon on Ascendant, Moon on Midheaven. For those who don't know, there is this. There's a couple statements where Picatrix will talk about that the Moon abhors the Ascendant or dislikes it, and or the fact that you have the Moon on the Ascendant is anonymous to the election. Because let us remember, let's think logically, because it all makes sense with logic, and it all makes sense with logic and through the principles. The first house in the making of a talisman is what? It is us, the mage, performing the magic. It is the talisman itself. It is the working at hand. The Moon is sometimes described as the most fickle of the planets. It's always changing phase. If you are building a house on the foundation made by the Moon, it could slip away. So much, in fact, that several times a month, it should be slipping away because it goes dark, it becomes new, and then has to build back its light again. And so in the same way that we have this logic where Lily is telling us that Saturn, the planet furthest away in the planetary sphere system, when it's in the first house on the ascendant, it's making the working stable. It's making that moment of time stable. The Moon on the ascendant is not making it stable. It's making it more prone to bend with the passing of time. So a Moon talisman where the Moon is on the midheaven bypasses this effect. And because I brought up a nice housing metaphor, a nice foundation metaphor, I get to give everyone another secret right now, which is only a secret to those who haven't been practicing, I think, for a while, or really living their lives by the merit of their astrological talismans, not just building a life talking about astrology and astrological magic, but trying to apply astrological magic in the domains of life, which, I think I'm at least one of the few people who are talking about it from that perspective. I've made my life on the use of astrological magic inside other domains of life. And one of the goals is that I'm sharing what that lived experience is. But because I brought up a house metaphor, and so one of the things that's different between those who mainly just talk about the nature of the rules and really the astrology of the astrological magic, rather than those who are applying it all the time into their life, is that you do get these debates around the placement of the moon, rather on ascendant and midheaven, really, I think, overly belabored. Definitely over belabored. And I think I also fell into this trap early on in my practice. Because, of course, if we can avoid a pitfall or avoid an issue in the future just with the right application of knowledge, of course, let us think through. Let us do this. I think it comes from a good spot. But the elections and the moments of time only take us so far. Several years ago, I was in a situation where it seemed like I needed to get a general contractor's license for building a structure in the United States. They don't just let anyone build a house. Actually, some places they do. But if you want to commercially be building a structure, whether on your property or not, it's helpful to get a general contractor's license. And one thing I learned is that I could spend a whole career learning about the finer points of the moisture retention properties of the walls of one's house and the various materials and building structures that would allow you to create a house or a room that was free of moisture. And being in the Pacific Northwest area of the United States, we get lots of rain and lots of water. So this was a major concern. So one could read, study, and talk about all of these fine details. But to think that the majority of the house and the project is caught up in the specificities of just the walls wouldn't be correct. A house or a dwelling is much more than just the wall. And although I could talk about it all the time, and it's an important, essential thing to be concerned about, it's not the end-all be-all. The foundation is also important. What is the use of the room? How is it electrically wired? All just as essential aspects of the dwelling, of the house. And so astrological magic is similar in that we have these other areas and these other elements which also require lots of time and study. But now to continue with the review of the election, we have another beautiful aspect here, which is the moon's lord is dignified by triplicity, Venus being in Cancer. And then look at this, the moon and Venus are having this mutual reception in each other's signs, to the point to where one could even say it's like Venus and the moon are also getting to experience their signs of rulership, as well as the moon getting to experience its sign of exaltation. There really aren't any good depictions of what this mutual reception between moon and Venus means magically. So I also found this quite interesting in an experimental way to see what would arise from this. And based off of my knowledge of the astrology, it wasn't a cause for concern. Venus is also a benefic planet. Moon and Venus are in the mutual reception, the Parivartana, and going into places of strength. Now, cons of the election. Moon is separating from its lord. So it is separating from Venus. Because of this mutual exchange, I think they're still getting mixed together adequately. So I would say that this aspect here, this separating aspect, from this perspective, is less severe of a separating aspect than it normally would be to have a main significator moon separating from its lord. Moon is also slow, understood. There is this retrograde Saturn pretty close to the descendant. Very interesting, certainly a cause to be aware of. In the times that I've experienced poor effects from Saturn on the descendant, they have been because of Saturn really being like directly conjunct, like within a degree and a half. And the only talisman that actually, I would say, had poor results with that situation was because of, another important note was just that I had very few other talismans. In fact, I had no other working talismans except that one. So in terms of what other diluting influences did I have, there was really nothing else. And my magical practice had been really shelved for many, many years. And I wasn't even really meditating again. So this was before my foray into the Buddha Dharma path taking refuge in the Buddha Dharma and getting exposed to Buddhist sorcery and magic. It's also 4 days before an eclipse. So potentially we're playing a little bit with fire, depending on one's rules of how close one will allow themselves to be close to the eclipse. So there are several aspects here. People would be like, absolutely not. You could never make it. Am I really showing you these things to say like, oh, it's okay, just make it? That's what Josh says. Not so much. Absolutely not. I'm showing you data. I'm showing you a variety of causes and conditions and their signifying results. And you can take that as you will. Ultimately, I'm most curious in providing a live comparison of the textual rules and practices and the practical lived experiences of one who does this and seeing how much they line up. Because to the degree that they differ, we can, I think, come around to some thoughts and beliefs and ideas that we're not getting the whole story. And I think there are a lot of practitioners who are a little bit blind to the idea that based off of the method in which they're learning this, that they are getting the whole story. And I know many of my friends and colleagues outside of the United States fully get what I'm saying. And that puts you in a unique group of individuals. So based off of my checklist criteria, this is either a +1 or +5. Though if we're really getting upset by the closeness to the North Node and the eclipse, could be -4. Could be absolutely stay away. This could be a terrible, horrific talisman and thing to be making. But let's see. Let's see how badly I cursed myself with it. Let's see if I died. And here we have Hour of the Moon. The result. Oh, yes. So a little before and after. So this was like one of the moments. This is like my blood pressure that I pulled. So this is what they would medically call stage 2 hypertension. Really not good. And what was it? Here we go. Stage 2 hypertension at 26 years old. Horrible. Not good one bit. And like I said, I just had my doctor come over to my house because we're really good friends. We've known each other for a while. And we just fully laughed about this. And he confirmed how bad it was when I told him this back in the day. And it was interesting because it was because of me talking to my mom, who I would say I have inherited the curse of my blood pressure and high cholesterol from. Telling her my symptoms and things, she was like, let's check your blood pressure right now. And this is from her kitchen counter when we pulled it together. And she was like, Josh, you got to really be doing something about this. And then thinking about that Saturn and Moon conjunction, it's like being so stressed, being so upset, being so stressed all the time, poor eating habits, poor sleeping habits. And because of that, getting into terrible, terrible shape. And so something needed to get done. So I went ahead, made this moon talisman, consulted with my doctor, and in 3 months, very much improved. Still not, 127, still not the best, still elevated, but way better from this 140 plus amount. And after doing another round of biometrics, really confirming that all of the biomarkers that one wants to be seeing in someone who is in decline of their heart disease, not in decline of the heart disease itself. It was like major thumbs up. And we pulled out the full stops. Besides making this talisman, doing weekly devotions to the moon, to Luna, extra prayers, extra purification rituals, and then dedicated a weekly exercise, vegetarian diet for a while. And I've been able to keep up a lot of those healthy patterns still to this day, which is excellent. And I was able to have a mastery over my diet and over the food, which the moon does rule as well. In a way that I've never had throughout my entire life. So really good benefit, really good boon from this talisman and from my close experience with death and heart disease. So I think a couple takeaways. Number one, in terms of utilizing talismans with health, this was fully done in collaboration with a doctor, with a medical professional, and someone who understands this kind of work as well. So I'm grateful. I'm lucky enough to have someone like that in my life. And I was able to lean on them to get some complementary medicine and a mix of naturopathic and allopathic remedies in order to just get myself back up to speed and back on a path towards life rather than the other side of the spectrum. I also found this really helpful and quite inspiring because one of the things because one of the causes of what I would say was the cause of this whole issue. Wasn't just singularly due to my stressful work environment, although that was the case, but because I went ahead and made this commitment to my teacher. And it was inspiring to see that one can really take on a severe level of karma, a severe level of commitment to the magic that I performed, and be able to walk that back, mediated through the planetary magic of the astrological talisman and through my mundane activities of life, of exercise, diet, stress reduction techniques. And so I think it's really made me a lot more bold in understanding the full scopes of this magic and how we're able to really see powerful change in our lives by mixing different magical traditions, astrological magic, and mundane effort.